If you want to retain caregivers and direct service workers longer, you should definitely check out this podcast episode with Dr. Lorre Laws. She goes beyond burnout and into caregiver-specific trauma and talks about the coping mechanisms that you can help your caregivers put in place. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Home Care Heroes and Day Service Stars podcast. If you provide services to keep older or disabled people living at home, then this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Ken Accardi.
Well, hello, and welcome to this installment of the Home Care Heroes and Day Service Stars podcast. I have another wonderful guest today. Her name is Dr. Lorre Laws, and Lorre is somebody whose work is nonprofit work, and she's really about not only helping our caregivers and anybody in the care profession avoiding burnout, but also understanding that sometimes burnout is more than burnout, and we're going to learn a lot about that. Before we even get into it, Lorre has written a great book that's called Nursing Our Healer's Heart. And after like one chapter of just kind of explaining where things are going, there's some really good materials in there that could even be used as kind of in your in-services as a way of, sort of helping your caregivers, deal with these, type of burnout and traumatic experiences. So with that as an introduction, I think we have a great guest for today. And let me introduce and say hi to Dr. Lorre Laws. How are you today?
I am so grateful to be here. And as you were giving that beautiful introduction, thank you so much. I was reflecting upon my very first job in healthcare was a caregiver. I was a certified nursing assistant in a skilled nursing facility. And so people who are doing, community-based direct care provision, y'all are rock stars. Like just right off the bat, thank you. Thank you for all that you do, because it is such important and meaningful work.
Well, thank you for that. And I think we're really on the right track here on a topic that everybody's going to resonate with and learn from. So I guess, when I first started speaking to you in preparation for this, I said, oh, I think people would like to learn a lot about caregiver burnout. And then you quickly kind of told me, well, yeah, there's burnout, but then there's even more. So let me just open it there and tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's interesting when, for my day job, I'm a researcher. And so I do a lot of reading of research and trying to solve problems, right? That's pretty much what a scientist does. And so one of the things that I really noticed in looking in our healthcare professionals, our helping professionals across all segments, was that everybody, there's been this like 50 years I've been around in this, where there's been this persistent burnout narrative. Like, oh, it's burnout, it's just burnout. You need to do more self-care. But after 50 years, you have to look and say, are we looking at burnout? Is it truly burnout? The definition for which hasn't been updated since 1970, when burnout syndrome was first introduced. So I got really curious about that in all the sort of geeky sort of ways that come with my professional role. And when I started examining burnout, I found that it wasn't really a trauma-informed definition. And I started looking at the symptoms between burnout and occupational related traumatization, which sometimes happens because of the nature of our work. It's very difficult to be a caregiver. It's very difficult to employ those who are giving direct care services. And looking at those symptoms and looking at maybe some of the kind of system related issues that might be contributing to that. And then what you find is that occupational related trauma symptoms have substantial overlap with burnout symptoms. And so unless a person is kind of is aware of that, you might be bringing, a teacup to a forest fire. And so I want to give you the forest fire hose if it's and really being more nuanced in how we look at some of the things that we are observing in our employees that we can help them with, and which will of course help them stay employed with us longer, which is everybody wins in those cases.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for for all that. There's a lot to unpack there. So I'm a little bit thinking uh, in my own life. So I'm running a software company that is helping people that are doing home care or services for, intellectual developmental disabilities, all these kinds of things. And we do this podcast, which is great as well. But I guess I sometimes find that, when it's finally Friday and it's like, whatever TGIF and that kind of thing, and I'm doing the entrepreneur thing, so I'm working late nights and I teach a college course and I get up early in the morning. That like Friday night comes around, which is supposed to be the big, night for me to do great things with my wife, and a lot of times I'll fall asleep in front of a movie by like 9:45, and that feels a little bit like burnout. But then, you kind of talked about, these bigger things, which is like trauma and, and I guess you said trauma and occupational trauma and being trauma informed. So that's something I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into. So I guess, I mean, when I think of some trauma that, I've experienced or we've all experienced, like, I have a disability in my left leg, which, might be traumatic, or, like we all, not sure if it happened where you were, but there was this thing called COVID that, kind of hit all of us a while back, and that,
Yes.
had an impact on this. So that sounds like, kind of unavoidable trauma and, and maybe just personal trauma. Like, I mean, my dad passed a while back, but, I still get sad about, losing my dad and that kind of thing. So there's that. But then I guess where we're going to go is that, there's really this occupational trauma of being a caregiver, being a direct service worker. Again, I'm not sure I'm understanding, but yeah, tell us a little bit more about these types of traumas.
Yes. Well, and these symptoms are so on Friday night it's like, well, am I really tired or am I burned out, and so there's the nuance of, yeah, by the end of a long week, 40, you might be tired on a Friday night. That's like maybe, but if it persists into Saturday and Sunday, and then you can barely get off the couch to go back to your duties on Monday, we might be talking something a little bit more, that might be more trauma related than not. And so when you start looking at the helping professions, as I have done, you start to see that how a person responds in their occupational role. There's the stress that we all encounter in our professional roles, and we're all pretty skilled at managing the baseline professional stress that comes with the job. But then there are things that happen in our jobs that are beyond the stress. And so this might be for a direct care provider going out into a home, and they're not being equipped, not being fully trained. If you have a patient, say, or a resident who has dementia and is being aggressive or violent, right? Or you get out and you have a patient who is incontinent and there's not enough supplies because, we're rationing supplies to save costs, which is understandable. But then when we look at that through a trauma-informed lens, through how that is impacting the employee, it is bringing further trauma exposure to whatever they've already experienced in their personal life. And so we have this, what I call the trifecta of trauma exposure. Whatever you and I and everyone else have endured in our lives, we carry that with us. We bring our whole selves to work, as do those in our employ. And then we have the occupational trauma exposure that comes with the job, right? We have to deal with the disasters and pandemics when they show up, and we suffer along with those in our care. We bring our whole heart to work with us, right? But that's inherent. That comes with being a caregiver or owning a company that provides those types of services. But so really, it's from an employer standpoint, it's looking at, well, am I, or we, through our policies, through our practices, are we robustly supporting our caregivers in ways that we're not visiting that avoidable kind of system related trauma exposure, which is often, maybe not lack of training, or perhaps a caseload that isn't as optimal as it could be, or it could be not having enough supplies, or having your caregivers experience violence. I know once I was in a home health situation, and I went out to the home to provide my direct care services. And I was met by three dogs that were aggressively doing a very good job of defending the property. Right?
Mm.
And I did not feel, well, I mean, even now I'm getting a little bit of goosebumps as I think about, I was like, I needed to care for the person inside of this residence. And the adult son would not, do anything about the dogs, just like told me to come in as they were like nipping, and I'm seeing all of the aggressive signs in dogs. And so, that was a trauma exposure for me, because I needed to go in there and to take care of my person, and it wasn't safe for me in that particular moment to do so. So I had to go to my car, call my office, reschedule for another time. The person didn't get the care they needed that day because of the unwillingness to make the environment safe. So that would be like an example of something that a caregiver might encounter out there, and we just sort of don't think of that necessarily as a trauma exposure, but that person's nervous system, and not to get too geeky, but the way that the physiology responds to that is that it is a flight or fight situation. And so we want to minimize those exposures as best we can. And for those who have been affected in these ways, having a culture of support and transparency, and then having the right tools to help your staff know how to do their self-care for in these kind of trauma related ways is different than just traditional self-caring practices.
Okay, got it. Well, yeah, I think you struck a lot of things that people will really connect with in that situation. So first of all, there's a company they're now called Activated Insights, and they most of the audience here probably knows them as Home Care Pulse. So Home Care Pulse has they really, the way they started was they started doing a survey of home care agencies, and they got thousands of home care agencies. And a lot of people look at this, they wait for next year's statistics, and they get to benchmark themselves against other companies, and and things like this. And in here, it like one of the big statistics that's shared every year is turnover in caregiving. And and I've read different reports. I can't remember the most recent numbers, but it's over like right around 2/3 of the caregiver workforce turns over every year. And secondly, of those that are turning over, more than half of them, something in the 50, maybe 58%, is what I tend to remember, they actually leave within the first 90 days. So I think that, like when you say, hey, you're putting people in, fight or flight situations, that's maybe what's happening is a lot of them are like, I didn't sign up for this, right? They sign up to be a caregiver, and and you've talked about some tough things, like the dogs barking, or and some of our home care clients aren't the most friendly people, right? I mean, they don't love us and embrace us. A lot of times we picture, just this great, this caregiver and the person that they're helping, having this loving and supporting relationship, but sometimes it's not like that. And and also, I mean, you go through some training, and then there's the first time, there's an accident, there's an incontinent situation, or there's I think a lot of times these caregivers feel very alone, and they're like, I don't know how to deal with this. And it's not like they can go down the hall and get the more senior person to help them, because they're just alone in the house. And they, if they feel like they have to figure this out on their own, I think they're like, hey, that other kind of job might be more attractive. So I guess that I could definitely see that these are traumatic. And just like you think back to the situation with the dogs, and that's something that just pops immediately to mind. Yeah, I think these are, much more traumatic than me being tired on Friday afternoon and falling asleep after I, have a slice of pizza and turn on, the latest thing on Netflix. So
Right.
that's great. Okay, well, I guess, I mean, every time we get together on home care heroes and day service stars, we're hoping that there can be, something that the person, investing their time in listening to this can take away, right? And so what are things like, how are some ways that these owners, these people who are directors of personnel or, kind of leading and hiring and overseeing the work of these caregivers, what can they do to help them, through this and maybe hopefully retain them longer?
Yeah, and this is a phenomenon that's occurring across healthcare in all disciplines, that we're faced with similar challenges. And really it comes to two things. It comes to some education, and I would include, and my book lays it all out. You could have 6 weeks of an in-service or weekly support or training. But I think really onboarding your employees and preparing them for what they might see, because not every family system is healthy. There could be drugs, or alcohol use. There could be animals. There could be, hoarder situations. I mean, I've seen them all in my own practice, and it affects the employee in ways that they aren't really, as think of someone who's been in your employee for maybe 2 weeks. They're not going to transparently share their vulnerability. They're not going to volunteer that they felt unsafe. They may not even have the words for it if they don't understand how trauma works, which many people do not in the body. They may not even be able to articulate what they need. And so I think as employers, the single most important thing that we can do, and I'm an employer myself, so I'm having to walk and talk and all of my stuff at the same time, is really educating people a little bit about the difference between stress and burnout and trauma, and how that kind of lands in the body, and making it a culture of compassion where, we know it's hard out there. We know everybody's had their own situations in their personal life, and those might get touched on and kind of activated by what you experience out in the community. And so here, like I have for example, there's a microdoses matters practice. And this is something that I would, on day one, start with my new hires. I would have this be a part of every staff meeting, everything. And the microdoses matters practice is something that you do throughout the day in 30 seconds or less, right? Because a lot of people have this perception that self-care means I need to take a half a day off and go to the spa or go out for a hike that takes 3 hours, and so it's not the nervous system in these kind of challenging work contexts. It needs nurturance, little micro doses of nurturance and signals of safety throughout the day to help that employee stay regulated and feeling safe. And so the microdoses matters practice goes something like this. I would say to my employees, find a place where you feel safe for 30 seconds. A lot of times for my home health nurses, that's in their car, in between their, before or after, or in the restroom when you're taking a natural restroom break, right? So find those little moments where you can have 30 seconds where you're in a kind of safe, private environment, so that you can attend to yourself, right? So the first step is safe place. The next one is ground. And I'm going to hold it up. I mean, for the listeners, I always have a little grounding stone of some sort that I carry in my pocket for just this purpose. But if that's not your thing, you always have your feet and they're always on the ground, so you can connect to the earth. So however you bring your energy and kind of reconnect into your body and to the earth, that is a signal of safety to your nervous system. And the next thing that you can do to actually signal safety is maybe take a couple of deep breaths, like those big, deep count to 4, inhale, hold to the count of 4, and then exhale to the count of 4. And what that does is that if we think about it evolutionary, when you're running from the saber-toothed tiger, you're not deep breathing, right? You're in flight or flight, because the caveman is either fighting the saber-toothed tiger or it's running away from it, right? And so similarly, you're not breathing deeply. So when you take those deep cleansing breaths, And it's helpful to exhale using kind of a ha sound, like, I can't, my mic will cut me out, but, or to exhale like you're blowing through a straw. What that does is it stimulates a part of our vagus nerve that helps us remember that we're safe, even though we're feeling like maybe we're not. Right. And then the last thing, let's recap. The first three steps is safe place, ground and center. And then the third one is signal safety to your autonomic nervous system, which what we talked. And then the fourth step is placing both of your hands over your heart. That's your healer's heart, is the fourth step. And that is, I'm going to invite all y'all to just do that right now and just notice. Notice how that brings your energy into a more calming configuration. And then
Doing
you
it right now.
remember,
So I'm off camera, but I'm grounded. I'm at home. I feel safe. I'm going to do my breath. Putting my hands over my heart. I mean, it does immediately feel different. It's incredible. Yeah, I think I guess I would say in most cases that caregivers have that experience of moments of solace. So they'll have some time when they're alone, and hopefully they don't have to go out to the car because, like if they're not
right,
facilities based, they'll be in the home, and
right.
they could find that private time, and they could do something like this. And yeah, so I think that's really, really powerful. I mean, I can't say that I've officially done meditation, but every once in a while, like I just like see some video or something that says, hey, if just try, just, sit there, lie peacefully and just, take an in breath, count to 8, take an out breath, count to 8. And when I do it, which is very rarely, unfortunately, I do feel amazing after doing it. So that's
Yeah.
great. It's a great self-care technique.
Yeah,
So
and
I
it's
get,
something
go
that
ahead.
I'm sorry, and it's something that it's not a one and done, because while we're in our professional roles, that stress exposure is still there, even if it's a kind of a lull time, right? If it's quiet time. And so as many times throughout the day as this can be done. And it can be done. I mean, you can do it in 10 seconds. Or, if you're in a difficult situation, let's just say that you're training an employee who has had one of these more challenging, maybe potentially, trauma exposure type of events that they're navigating. Even while they're in the heat of the moment, they can, put an imaginary bubble around them so that they feel safety, right? Visualize a bubble of safety around you. Notice your feet on the ground while you're even in this difficult situation. Notice your feet are on the ground. Take a deep breath while you are navigating this challenging situation. And I'm wearing a necklace, which may not be, but a lot of times I'll just like fiddle with my necklace. Or if I can't get my hand to my heart, if that's not appropriate, I might just tuck my hair behind my ear, or I might adjust my glasses. Just some sort of gesture to the nervous system that you're safe. This is a hard situation, not a dangerous one. And kind of untangling the language, the internal language that is happening. And so as many times as that can be done throughout the day, whether it's in a relatively quiet, calm time, or if it's in a particularly challenging time, what that's doing is building nervous system resilience. Right. And that really is how we prevent burnout. And that's really how we can start to retain our employees and have, optimized workforce well-being, is starting with the most primal system that innervates every part of our body, starting there at root cause and then working our way out. And that's how we can really address, the burnout and the turnover challenges that are facing all of us.
Hmm. So, so first of all, I mean, so many things here that, we talked about this culture of compassion, and I think that, home care agencies and disability service providers would say that's what they're all about. We're all about having this culture of compassion, but they're saying that in the context of, caring for the older or disabled folks that they're doing it, and they're not maybe, kind of expanding that to, their own folks and the kind of the trauma they've achieved. So, again, I'm maybe a slow study here, but I definitely understand that there's some education and that, like just having heard in this podcast about, something I could do to, hit your 4 points of, I'm in a safe place, I've grounded myself, and, I'm doing something that signals safety to my nervous system, and I have my hands over my heart and this kind of thing. I mean, that's really powerful right away. But um, are there parts as well that could be either I guess from the home care agency perspective, are they just kind of training them in these self-care techniques, or are there some other things that they should do that are a little bit more, when they do an in-service and there's like a number of caregivers together, or they're doing like an event in the community and things like that, are there things that they could do that, help address some of the, those traumatic situations that caregivers have experienced? Like what might you recommend there?
Yeah, and that's my nonprofit offers just those sorts of programs, and so really, what it is it's sort of a structured in service. So many. The first thing, we can't solve address a problem wholly unless the people that we're with whom we are trying to address it have the basic knowledge, right? So there's the education piece. And this can be integrated into the onboarding process, into the training process, and then continuing kind of that education piece throughout the in-services. And and each organization is different how they support their employees, but integrating it's not just a one and done, but we call it in academia, we call it embed it and then thread it. All right, so you embed kind of the education piece around, like, self-care. Let's do trauma-informed self-care, because everyone on the planet, every single human being has experienced some form of trauma, and it is in varying degrees of healedness, right? So embedding, like, let's take trauma-informed self-care and then weave it. So that's the embedding, and then thread it through the rest of how you support your employees. And we don't have time sadly, to go through a lot of the practices, but in the book I have over 100 practices that can be used. And what the grander framework for this work, it's called the innate care plan, where each employee would start to learn the language of their nervous system and how to navigate it professionally to keep them professionally well, right? I mean, this is like, it's a win for the person for whom is receiving care, it's for the employee, and it's for the organization. So it's a win-win-win. And so using that innate care plan, which has 3 A's that we've kind of touched on today, which is awareness of your nervous system, which we've done here today. And then there's how do you attend to your nervous system, which we did one practice here today. And then the third A is alignment. How do I align what is happening within me to my outer world, right? To when I'm at work, how does this translate? Now that I'm feeling regulated and safe in my nervous system, now I can translate that into what I'm doing in my professional role. And then, of course, the B part of this care plan formula is balance, which is all the traditional self-caring wellness things that we all know to do: get enough rest, eat right, exercise, be in healthy, thriving relationships, financial wellness, all of the usual suspects show up there. But if we start with the external self-care in the traditional sense, and you're trying to do that on top of a nervous system that isn't regulated, it won't be effective. And that's why the traditional approaches to burnout over 50 years have not been wholly successful. So I would say trauma-informed self-care. And then that will lead to the outcome is that your employees will be regulated in their nervous system, which translates to better care, better everything, right? And then there's a sense of internal reconnection within. And now, because we're regulated, we can connect better with those in our care and with one another as colleagues. And then there's the important one, which is the name of my book, which is Our Healer's Heart. Our healer's heart gets restored because during these trauma exposures, it feels like it's getting broken. And so we want to keep that caregiver's why for coming to this profession, to our organization. We want to nurture their healer's heart. So they want to stay and continue to do the good work that they're doing and to do it for us. So that's kind of the grander framework that could be integrated into an organization's onboarding and training and ongoing support of their employees. And it I got goosebumps as I'm saying it, because I've seen this. I've seen how this works in other contexts, and properly done, it has tremendous positive benefits.
Wow, incredible. So I guess, I mean, to sum things up, a few major things I've heard and I know, or there's certainly an incredible amount of turnover in caregiving. And I know that anybody listening is like, holy cow, if I could incorporate some of this and I could make my caregivers enjoy their jobs more, stay more, refer their friends, and feel nurtured in our company compared to our competitors, these are going to be big wins for this. And then a big thing I heard is that I think you said there's over like 100 practices in the book. So they could go out to wherever they buy their books, like your Amazon or on their Kindle, or they could download it on Audible or whatever they do. But they could go and they could get Nursing Our Healer's Heart. And yeah, look for that. And I think I'm going to read it myself, just to make myself more balanced and those types of things, and see what I could do to help our employees. We have different stress, just kind of, in our world. I won't delve into that. But then also, so if they wanted to get in touch with you further, Dr. Lorre Laws, is there a way that they could get in touch with Dr. Lorre Laws?
They certainly can. And my website is that same name. So it's drlorrelaws.com. And you can just Google my name and I'll pop right up. If you can't remember the URL, I am on social media with the same handle at Dr. Lorre Laws. So however, I am everywhere and I am here in service. This is my Dharma. And I'm a spiritual person, and so I consider this to be my light work and my service, not only to my profession but to all helping professionals. So just know that I am here, and I can consult and guide and support however anyone is needing those services.
Love that. Okay, so just to clarify one thing really quick, so Lorre is spelled Lorre.
Yes.
So it's Dr. Lorre Laws. So that would be DR for doctor, Lorre for Lorre, and then LAWS. So drlorrelaws.com. And the book again is called Nursing Our Healer's Heart. And it's available anywhere on the planet that books are sold, I'm sure.
Yep.
And with that, I think we will say thank you, and we'll wrap it up for today on Home Care Heroes and Day Service Stars. Thank you so much, Dr. Laws.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks again.
Thanks for joining us today on the Home Care Heroes and Day Service Stars podcast, produced by Ancoda. You can listen to back episodes by visiting 4homecareheroes.com. That's the number 4, then the words homecareheroes.com.